African Union hosted a conference on debt this week in Lome, Togo, under the name Africa's Public Debt Management Agenda, Restoring and Safeguarding Debt Sustainability, with the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, Mr. Clava Gateti, highlighting 5 priorities, including relooking at debt as a development tool. Online, Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director at the Democracy Development Program at the University of KZN and convener at the Africa Policy Circle. Dr. Kariuki, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. to your listeners.
Right, let's have a look. Africa's Public Debt Management Agenda, a very serious conference, and what to you are the takeaways coming out of this? We've already seen 5 priorities being mentioned.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that is coming out of this conference is an acknowledgement that African countries that are highly indebted need to start doing something different in terms of the way they manage their resources and the way they manage their debt that they currently have, if they are going to have any development of some sort or economic growth for the year. The burden of debt on the continent is rising and scaling up very sharply because of various reasons. Firstly, maybe most of these organized countries are borrowing for infrastructure development on their projects, and others to pay debts. They're borrowing debts to pay another debt. And of course, some of them is they have serious development financing deficit of other projects that they have not been able to adequately plan for. Whatever the case may be, the bottom line is that if this trend continues without serious intervention by the same countries, there will be serious repercussions in terms of the political and social stability, in terms of economic growth, and definitely they get to a place where they cannot manage themselves. They have to, be managed by either Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, or even superpower countries like China and the USA. So the conclusion was that it's important that countries take serious measures to reverse this trend if they're going to exercise any form of economic growth in this year and the years to come.
Which also speaks to something else, is that historically Africa has always been in debt. I can remember many years ago some African countries actually having their debt written off because it was such a disaster. I personally thought it was a constructive thing to do because it seems as if the whole continent is enslaved by debt. Previously, our people were taken from the continent and sent to other parts of the world as slaves. Now they just leave us at home and enslave us with debt, it seems.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is the tragic story of our continent that we have historically inherited. But even post-independence, there has been very little appetite by most countries on the continent to want to get out of historical debt and even to manage the current debt that they're inheriting. And I think it's also important to underscore that aside from the historical debt that we've inherited through our colonial, engagement, there is also the fact that successive governments post-colonial or post-independence have not shown serious appetite to stop, acquiring new debt, primarily because there is this phrase that goes across African countries: "It is our time to eat. We fought for this independence, therefore it's our time to pay ourselves back." That has created loopholes for massive corruption, which we're still dealing with even now. And it didn't start now; it has been a historical phenomenon in most countries, over the years. And one of those also other aspects is that there has been very little appetite, of course, to want to, engage in better resource negotiation, especially because we have, as we discussed in some of the previous shows, we have serious resources on our continent that do not predispose us to be in a debt situation, even if, you are to look at the other way around. We are not leveraging our resources, natural resources, good enough to be able to pay off these debts that are hanging on our heads, and 2, stop borrowing. And so we have created a perpetual cycle through our political leadership over the years that, corruption has become like a buzzword. And then there's no, you have to look so hard to find a country that is seriously tackling corruption with visible intervention. It is there in policy documents, it is there in national development plans, but in practice, there is very little to show for it. And I think this also contributes to the current situation that the continent is finding itself in.
Indeed, perhaps the phrase should not be our time to eat, because I've heard some individuals in this particular country, and I'd love to mention who they were, who once told me, Shafiq, it's our time to eat, as they crammed their pockets full of filthy lucre via corruption. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm sure you'd agree. Isn't it time for our politicians, rather, to say time for our people to eat? And I think that attitudinal adjustment could actually be part of the solution. What are your thoughts? I know it's philosophical.
I agree with you 100%. It is time to prioritize citizen-centered development that prioritize the interest of the citizens far above the political parties, far above our politicians, and anything else that has come in between. The tragedy we have, Shafiq, on our continent is that we still have a crop of leadership, political leadership in this case, that is not sensitive to the plight of their citizens who elected them to represent their interests in government or in parliament. That tragedy has continued to grow to the extent that even the young people who aspire to take politics as career start seeing that political patronage as the way to get into politics. Don't forget the socioeconomic background that the continent is facing. I mean, different countries are facing socioeconomic challenges, high levels of unemployment among the youth. And I'm sure you must have seen the latest statistics South Africa report on the levels of unemployment. Young people who are waiting to get into spaces of influence see politics as one way to escape poverty. But the notion of what leadership, political leadership means to them is so skewed because they have no political role models who have shown that you can still succeed in government and in politics with your morals and values intact. That is what we are lacking. And this point creates a perception that corruption actually is a job creator. Because there's so many interventions going on around the continent to stop corruption, and it's sending a wrong message that it's a problem that we cannot solve, yet it's a problem that can be solved. Can we have, for the first time on our continent, ethical leadership that is sensitive to good governance, that is sensitive to citizens' interest, and it's sensitive to the future generations yet unborn, that already in some of these countries that are highly indebted, the children who are not even born have a hanging debt before even they're conceptualized.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy, Shafiq.
It is. Just as a matter of interest and as a footnote, what do you think of Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso in social media? There's so much going on about him, what he's doing in the country and the changes that he's making. Is he part of a solution? Is he a maverick, or is it just plain social media nonsense?
At this point in time, Shafiq, I think there is some level of insight into he is genuinely interested in prospering his country. He's genuinely interested in ensuring that the Burkinabés enjoy quality life. He's also interested in ensuring that Burkinabés enjoy the resources, the natural resources that they have been blessed with without relying on international help. Time is always a good test. He's still new in his leadership presidency, but he's already showing indications of the kind of leadership that this continent has been yearning for. Apart that he's also young in terms of his years, and also young in the presidency, but he has resisted the temptations that our current crop of leadership have failed to resist. He has resisted, for example, for changing his own rank in the army. If it was other crop of leadership we've been having, he could probably be the general of the generals by now. Yeah. But he has resisted the temptation. He has also resisted the temptation to increase his own salary. He's still being paid as a captain.
Wow.
Majority of our leaders, by now, you can't even come too close to them because the type of oxygen they're breathing is not the one we breathe. The money they would be asking by now would strangle the country. Thirdly, he has initiated the reforms within his own country and leading by example. He has initiated, for example, serious initiatives around stopping corruption by all its formation and sending leaders to court for those who have been mismanaging resources. And fourthly, he has decided to stop any international contracts that Burkinabes can do themselves. I mean, there is a list of issues that he has brought on board. Again, I'm very cautious to say that its time is always a good test. But so far, there is an indication he is finding this love from Africans across the continent and even in diaspora, because the continent has been yearning to see leaders who can be selfless and can put aside all kinds of interest to promote the interest of the people they lead. He is a young man to watch, and hopefully he will stay the course for the years to come.
In fact, my hope is that he probably will be the target of the so-called first world countries who don't like people like that in Africa, because he's chasing them out and allowing the local people to benefit. I just hope and pray that he is around for long enough to create an unstoppable legacy. That's what I want to see. The Burkina Faso move so fast and so quickly into a good space that it becomes almost like COVID in the continent, infectious, and everybody else follows suit.
I agree with you. It's the same prayer, and I think a prayer for many, many Africans on the continent and out of the continent, including some of those countries in Europe and in some parts of Middle East, who are starting to see that their appetite to come and disillusionize the continent has gone now. There is a crop of emerging leadership that is starting to say enough of what we've seen is enough. It's time to put the interest of the continent forward. We can all pray that firstly he enjoys the security of global support. Right now he's enjoying that. There have been 5 attempts on his life already. That's how fierce it is when a leader emerges and wants to interfere with these networks. But we are also seeing he's receiving global support. And so, of course, even those who want to, harm him are now scared because it's going to be, they are not sure what can this erupt. The second thing is that we all pray also that the African Union backs him up. Because again, we have had discussion on the show in previous years how this African Union has not been very supportive to its own leaders who stand up for what is right. I think the African Union needs now to see that there is an emergence of a new crop of leaders that requires not only just political support from their own countries, but requires political support from the African Union itself. And it's important that they even be vocal about it, because the more they keep silent, they keep on entrenching the fact that good leadership in Africa is not good. We want to see a different conversation, I imagine, from African Union. Yes, they may have come through military coups, but let's call the spade what it is. It is time to promote good governance on our continent and support those leaders who represent and espouse good leadership. I think that's an important thing to have a conversation about.
100%. We did drift a little off topic, but I think it was hugely significant what we have discussed in today's version of African Mirror. Unfortunately, it's time to close that part of the show, but Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director of the Democracy Development Program at the University of KZN and convener at the Africa Policy Circle, as always, it's been great chatting.